Welcome to the committee. I must say, I was listening to your comments earlier on in relation to the tracker stuff, and the rage inside me was getting stronger and stronger because it was being passed off as that it was you didn't communicate or you didn't perform, give the information that was required, and that this is an industry-wide issue. Like, and you know, and you talk about the redress scheme and trying to right the wrongs, and you talked about how you apologise again to your customers, but this wasn't just an information flaw. Like, you've provided us in our question and answers, it's not connected, but you've provided us the salaries of yourself and your colleagues, some of you earning up to €500,000. You've watched these individuals lose their homes. You actually took the homes from some of these individuals. In my view, this was daylight robbery by a financial institution who took money off their own customers. And not only when this was pointed out to you by those very same customers, you denied it. When the Financial Serviceman's Ombudsman said that yous were wrong and your customers were right, you fought the Ombudsman. When the High Court told yous that yous were wrong and they were right, you fought the High Court, and you went all the way to the Supreme Court. And while you robbed these customers, you took their houses off them as well, some of them. And then you tried to pass it off as that this was an issue of information, that this is an industry-wide issue. This wasn't just a small little error within the bank. I sat with one of these customers who had a letter out saying that she should voluntarily surrender her family home with arrears of just over €400. First time ever in arrears. I looked at the contract and it was as plain as day to me that that individual was entitled to go back onto a tracker rate. And that was one of the appeals that went to the Financial Service Ombudsman. Now, if I did that, if I took €20,000 from one of these individuals, I would be locked up in the Joy. But unfortunately, the history here in this state is that bankers can rob their customers, and I'm not targeting this at individuals, but I'm talking about institutions, can rob their customers and then dress it up as a redress scheme, we'll give you back the money, and no heads roll at all within the bank. And that's how a lot of people feel. And I think that it's, you know, while I welcome your comments in saying that you apologise, have you apologised for taking the Financial Service Ombudsman to the High Court? Have you apologised for appealing the High Court's decision? It was only when the Central Bank came in and said, folks, this isn't about the 80 cases before the FSO. This is 1,300 cases that your bank has where you have taken money from your own customers, where some of them you've left so high and dry that you've actually taken their family home from them. And I would ask you to respond to that, because that's how a lot of people feel in relation to what your bank has done. And I think that the words that you've echoed in this chamber earlier on today in terms of that this was information and this was an industry-wide, I think is trying to deflect from the responsibility as you as CEO, who overseen the appeal to the Supreme Court, who allowed these people to be out there still being paid overcharged by your bank, and you were overseeing a process where you were fighting them tooth and nail through the courts. It's appalling what your bank has done. And I didn't intend to go down that line, but you enraged me in terms of the way that you presented this earlier on. I think it was inappropriate given the scale and the suffering that no redress scheme will ever be able to make right the difficulties that some of those individuals, some of them who I know personally, went through, the sacrifices they went through, the anguish, the stress, the health implications, all of that, because of what your bank has done. And to categorise it as not providing them the proper information and as an industry-wide problem is disrespectful, absolutely disrespectful, and I'm appalled that that's the type of approach that you took today.
Okay, so let me respond to that. I think I was answering a different question. So if we go back to your point of principle, in June 2015, I announced the enforcement action and I announced the redress and compensation scheme. I did that in a public way. I didn't hide behind a press release. I actually did it in the boardroom of Permanent TSB in front of the Irish media. I then came to this House and answered the questions. So in terms of the attitude and the remorse that the bank showed, I would hope that if you look back at your records for 2015 and in June 2015, I didn't hide behind anything. I stood up there in front of the Irish media and I apologise for the absolute distress that we caused to customers. I also was very clear that it would be irresponsible and indeed completely without empathy if I tried to imply that the redress and compensation scheme would, in all cases, complete any remediation of any harm, because obviously I don't know all the individual circumstances that you may know better. What we tried to do at the time was to design a scheme within the best of our ability to make sure that we did the right thing for customers, including those who suffered loss of ownership. So in terms of your first point, I would apologise if I gave you the impression today that I was trying to deflect from what I did in 2015. I'll repeat my position to you. Today in 2015, it was a sad episode in the history of the bank. We caused enormous detriment to a large number of customers. I apologised in person, and in terms of the scheme that we tried to design and build, it was a scheme that we felt was the best scheme that we could do within the circumstances that we held. In terms of your second point around personal accountability, I repeat what I said at the time. I have found no evidence to suggest that anyone within the group took a conscious decision to deprive customers of the trackers. And if any such evidence emerges, I'll take the action that is appropriate.
To give you some evidence, see when the Financial Service Ombudsman said you were wrong, that was your evidence. But obviously something happened at board level that decided, no, we will appeal this to the High Court. Now, whether there was a conscious or deliberate effort at the original point in time, when they were moved off, when they were not replaced on the tracker rates, when the Financial Service Ombudsman found that you were in error, you should have rectified the situation. Afterwards, when the High Court found that you were in error, you should have rectified the situation. Now, there was a conscious effort, and that's the point I'm making. In layman's term, if this happened anywhere outside a financial institution, people would be locked up in Mountjoy. Because what happened here is individuals' money was stolen. It was stolen by a financial institution. And the redress scheme, which is forced upon you, you have to make right. The central bank have made that clear. And you did the right thing, but you had no option but to stand up and say that you're going to make right. What you are doing is returning the original money that you took from them back to the customer with a little bit of top-up for the pain and suffering that they caused, amounting to about 10%. And that's the problem here. So I put it to you that there was a conscious effort and a decision taken, and maybe you can enlighten this committee whether you were part of the decision-making process that either appealed to the High Court, I'm not sure if you were there at the time, or to the Supreme Court.
The facts are the facts that I explained in 2015, Deputy.
Is that a yes or a no?
I can only answer your question, which is, in June 2015, I apologised on behalf of the organisation. We put in place the scheme. Again, I apologise to you this afternoon if you felt that the use of the term industry-wide tracker review or information was something to deflect from that. I give you my word that it wasn't. I was merely answering a different question. Can I
ask you to answer the question? Were you involved in the decision of your institution to appeal the High Court decision to the Supreme Court?
I was involved in that decision, that's correct.
You were involved in that decision.
Yeah.
And you were involved in that decision, knowing at that time that there were dozens, probably 80, I think, that were before the FSO. So at least you knew at that case that there were 80 similar cases before the FSO, that the High Court has made a determination that you had erred in law. You decided to fight them. You decided to fight the FSO, who were acting on behalf of your customers.
The case is more complex than that, and the decision that the board took at that time was a decision around a variety of different factors. In terms of the consequences for the tracker review, those facts are now in front of you. You have seen where we're at today, and what we have to do now is to move forward on this case in terms of the CBI tracker review, and to ensure that mistakes like this are not made again.
I know that's what you would like to do, and that's what a lot of people have to do, and what we have to do, and I'll do it now. But the point is, where's the accountability in all this? Where's the accountability? This is a state-owned bank. The country owns the state. This bank robbed from citizens of this country. And the people who decided, when they were caught out by the High Court and by the FSO, who decided to appeal that and try and appeal it to the Supreme Court, which is within your rights, who made the wrong decision, which you've never apologised for taking that appeal to the Supreme Court, which those decisions placed more hardship on these individuals. Because these individuals were sitting at home and monitoring websites like Ask About Money and looking at what was happening in terms of the High Court. And when the High Court made the decision, they thought, finally, we will get our tracker rates back. We may be able to keep our house. We may be able to put food on the table for our children. But no, high-paid executives within Permanent TSB sitting around a board table decides, we're going to fight this. And you take it to the Supreme Court, and it takes months and months after that before the decision is eventually taken to withdraw the appeal, because the central bank have come in with a review and said you have to make right the wrongs that you have done. Now, that's the problem here. It's not like there is no accountability within the financial institution. Nobody is going to be held accountable for this. That's like, how could nobody be held accountable for this? You've robbed 1,372 of your customers. Like, that's what happened here. You took their money. You are giving it to them back now in the redress scheme. But how come nobody is going to be held accountable within the financial institution for this, when it became known that this is what was happening?
So the issue's been categorised by you and others as a lot of things. And the facts are that it was a systems design failure on our part and a legacy issue before I started. The failure was a systems gap. It was an operational weakness. I apologise to you and your colleagues in the past for this and the impact that it had on the customers involved, and I continue to apologise today. As I said, when the issue arose last year, we moved as quickly as we could to do the right thing. And I can sit here this afternoon and I can only tell you that we are trying to rebuild trust, we are trying to rebuild Permanent TSB, we are trying to do the right thing. And that is where I would leave it.
Well, there's no point, obviously, dealing with this issue much more, because you've made your statement. You'll continue to dress it up in the way that you have and present it in the way that you have, the system failure. It was not a systems failure. A systems failure is when a computer throws out an interest rate that's wrong. This was people at the end of the phone saying, you have put me onto the wrong rate. I want my tracker rate back. And decisions being taken by individuals within banks to say, no, you're not entitled to that tracker rate back. That's not a systems failure. That was people within the bank. That was decisions that were taken at a high level that was being filtered down to staff who were answering phones. Can I ask you in relation, and you can answer because this is connected.
So sorry, let me answer that one. And Deputy, in terms of that particular dimension, what I have sought to do since I became the leader of this organisation is to ensure that the operational practices that we have under my watch are to a higher and the highest standards, such that those issues do not happen again. I think I need to say that.
With respect, I need to say that you were part of the problem. You were part of the person who decided to appeal this to the Supreme Court. You oversaw this institution while this was happening. This did not come to light just last year. The people have been bringing this to the attention of the Financial Service Ombudsman, but also first and foremost, because you can't go to the Financial Service Ombudsman until you have exhausted the appeal mechanisms within Permanent TSB, and they've been doing that for years. But a connected question. In relation to, I believe that 140 million was set aside for the redress scheme. How much of that has been paid out and expected to be paid out? How much of it has been paid out so far, and how much of it is expected to be paid out when this scheme ends?
Joe, do you have a breakdown?
So today, there's approximately 80 million has been paid out.
And what's the expectation of payout?
Well, we have provided for 145 million. As I outlined to Deputy McGrath earlier and Deputy Sherlock, we just completed phase 2 of the central bank review, and we've started the assessment. So until that assessment is completed, we won't be in a position to quantify if or whether we find any further issues. But as it stands right now, we're comfortable with the provision that's currently there.
And of the 80 million that has been paid out so far, how many of your customers that had their money taken from them? How many of the 1,372?
Approximately 1,200 customers. So 91% of customers affected have been fully redressed,
okay,
and 14% have decided to further an appeal.
So that's 172 appealing, is it?
No, it's not 172. Yes, I beg your pardon. It is. Yes, 172 appeals.
172 appeals. How many people, when they were restored onto their tracker rates, appealed the fact that you were restoring them onto the wrong rates and had a different rate then after appeal put in place?
I don't have that discrete detail with me.
Okay. Can you confirm that after the central bank found what you had done and that you had to put them back onto the appropriate tracker rates, that you, in some cases, put some of your customers onto a higher tracker rates than they were entitled to? Is that the case?
No, we haven't put customers back onto tracker rates that they were entitled to. We haven't put customers back onto higher tracker rates than they were entitled to.
So nobody has been restored onto a tracker rate, has made a case to use that the tracker rate was wrong, and has had their put onto a lower tracker rate.
I'm familiar that customers have raised complaints with regard to the fact that their expectation was that they would go onto a lower tracker rate. I'm familiar that some customers have taken an appeal to that regard. I don't have the exact detail with me, Deputy. I'm happy to get it for you afterwards.
Do you want any appeal of that nature to this point in time?
Off the top of my head, I'm not familiar that there's a case.
Okay. Maybe you'll supply the committee with information
I'm happy to
in relation to that. Can I ask you how many houses has Permanent TSB in their possession at this point in time? Either has been vacantly surrendered to you or has been repossessed to you. How many do you have at this point in time in your possession?
Yeah, 441, so 219 home loans and 222 buy-to-lets.
Okay, so these are vacant homes that you have.
Correct.
How long have you had on average, how long have you had these vacant properties in your possession?
Okay, so I was explaining earlier, it differs. We're now able to sell properties in recent times in about a 6-month period, but for some of them they took longer. So it cohorts different ways, Deputy. But we've appointed a new asset manager who is working with us to sell these properties at scale.
Have you engaged with the state? Like, I presume much of these properties are located around Dublin. I assume a large proportion of them. And your bank is not unique. Bank of Ireland has properties, AIB has properties, indeed the banks that we have shareholdings in, and some of them substantial, have vacant properties and they're doing nothing. And yet we have a homeless crisis, and we have people being accommodated in hotels through local authorities and all the rest. So have you engaged with the state to say, by the way, the state owns the bank, there's 441 houses that are lying empty, we have them, maybe that would be a bit of a solution to help alleviate the homelessness crisis and housing crisis we have in the capital? And what has been the response from the department if you've had that engagement?
So we haven't had that engagement with the department. We have had informal discussions with the Housing Association, but our primary strategy is to sell those properties for the best possible price in the open market.
Would there be anything stopping you handing those properties over to the Minister, for example, with responsibility for housing, so that they would be allocated to deal with the housing and homelessness crisis?
I think not at a principal level, but we have an obligation to ensure that we achieve the highest amount, the market value of that property. That's our obligation to the borrower, because to the extent that there is an excess due over and above that amount is still owed by the borrower. So our obligation is to maximise the value of those properties, which is why we've appointed a new national asset sale manager.